The concerns of mommy bloggers, middle-aged women with children. These are in many ways the same concerns of Frog Twitter. To call us a youth movement is fine. It can be good publicity in some way, I suppose, but in the end, it is not all we are. Mothers who don't want their children to be poisoned, whether by lettuce picked up by Oaxacan day laborers who play with their feces on the big agribase latifundia, or by pharmaceuticals, or by other forms of contamination of food. Airs, waters, places. This is our concern too. And for the moment, it's only Frog Twitter and mommy bloggers who really care about conserving health and nature in this way. The left has entirely given up on that. All of their organizations that are supposed to do one thing, for example, preserve air quality, really have all just become fronts for tranny or lesboid rights. City councils from Chicago or rural Minnesota feel the need to comment on events in the Polish parliament now instead of serving vital interests of their own place. In other words, there's systematic corruption of institutions that no longer do what they are supposed to do. And this is nowhere more true than for the environment. The Sierra Club was founded in the vision of John Muir, a conservationist who promoted idea of nature preserves. And until very recently, the Sierra Club actually cared about preservation of these parks, about clean air and water. But it was subverted by big donors, like all other environmental groups. Right now, the only supposedly environmental matter they promote is global climate change, which is such a large matter that it would be unsolvable even if it were real. But its reality for the moment exists mostly just in computer models, and the evidence is, in my opinion, very ambiguous. The fact is, even if they're right, this is something that can be argued against, and their solution is just a wealth transfer from the first world to the third world that has nothing to do to solve this problem. It does nothing. But the only thing it does, it advances the old goal of the left, which is global wealth transfer. That was also the fundamental program of Lenin as well as of Rawls. It's always the same thing, the same goal, no matter what justifications are used. But meanwhile, the plastics pollutions of the oceans, most of which comes from third world and from China, they have little to say on that. They say nothing about that, or very rarely they say ineffective things on that, such as banning straws. Recycling will not solve that problem. Nor do they have much to say about destruction of air quality, the possible ill effects of the 5G network on human and animal health, on the health of birds, the mass use of pesticides and of glyphosate, the pervasive xenoestrogen contamination of the world, the filth in our cities, disease and misery spread by the tolerance of the homeless and by the creeping shantytowns caused by mass third world immigration. You absolutely can't be someone who cares for nature or any of these things, but also believe in open borders. And as many of you know, the Sierra Club was an anti-immigration outfit for just this reason. Because population increase puts pressure on the environment, quite aside from even just the quality of the immigrant. But the Sierra Club absurdly changed its position in the 1990s as a result of a big donation by David Gelbaum. They became whores, just like almost all professors. They are paid catamites for David Gelbaum and those interests, and are intellectual whores and propagandists now. The guy leading the Sierra Club at the time, by the way, when they made this change, when they abandoned immigration restriction, the guy who forced through this change, his name was Adam Werbach, Werbach. Werbach. I mean, go look at this guy's face. If you want to see a deformed, inbred Stettelbilly face, look at Adam Werbach. Go look at his face and you will understand entirely the meaning of this change, okay? It's the complete subversion of the environmental movement by the lowest elements of American society, so that now it's just another zombie institution that only wears the skin and the rhetoric of its former self, but serves interests quite different from the environment or of conservationism. But do you believe that people who grow up thinking that animals, for example, are machines created for man's use, and that outsiders do not have souls, do you believe such people will have any care for the well-being of nature or of mankind, even when this ancient hatred is secularized? But regardless, all the institutions that were supposed to care for the airs, waters, places, for the preservation of pristine nature have been subverted now. So now the only people who still carry on this fight are mommy bloggers who have children, and they do not want their offspring and posterity reduced to deformity and slavery, and then also us, Frog Twitter, who share the same aims. And this is because the preservation of the biological heritage of mankind and the possibility of a political morality that is based on breeding, that has at its center not the individual or his comforts, nor the proliferation of the species or of mere life by quantity, but instead that sees nature from the point of view of the instinct for beauty, which is to say, the preservation of its kinds by type and the increase in distinction among them. Maybe some of my friends would not go as far as I do in this, but we are all you can think of basically the principle of natural conservationism, but now applied also to politics at large, to peoples, to the fates of nations. This is our concern. This is why we stand against mass immigration, because it is analogous to the presence of invasive species that wipe out local species and that destroy local kinds and types and the special local ecology. We stand against this for the same reason a conservationist would stand against the introduction, for example, of Asian carp in mid-western water bodies. Humans, yes, have always traveled, always colonized and conquered, but don't let the other side fool you with this propaganda. That's not what is going on here. This is not Vikings or Phoenicians or Spanish colonizing and exploring. This is the mass slave drivers that have taken hold of the West, a few hundred large crony interests. They are inviting invasive species by mass so as to harass their own competitors locally. I stand against the previous attempts of the English, for example, to do the same, where they use Tamils as biological warfare around the world. They introduced Tamils from South India as their invasive species of laborers in parts of Africa where they do not belong in such numbers, or in Fiji where they came to outnumber the local population. This must not happen, and the Anglo introduced also the black to the New World as a form of biological warfare against the noble native tribes here in the Americas. I stand completely against that as well. These are processes quite unlike previous forms of migration or models of elite dominance or conquest, and such changes are destructive of natural types and must be resisted or reversed. This is origin, I would say, of our opposition to immigration. At least it's mine, as well as the meaning of my so-called racism. And everything I've talked about in this show is a reflection of our concern with the conservation of nature, which is why there can never be any compromise or agreement between us and agribusiness as it exists now, between us and industrial farms and factory animal husbandry, or between us and the agrochemical industry, or the degenerated slave-based modes of food production that are being imposed now. We can never agree to what the pharmaceutical industry, or in general the entire medical sector of the West, is doing. So you see who opposes us, because these are enormous interests with enormous power and influence in politics and media. Basically everything you see in media as a production of academia. They're teaching about nature, about race. Almost everything is designed as lies by these crony industries to prime you to accept their trash and poison down your throat. And we will never come to any agreement with them, but will remain their mortal enemies. And the medical sector alone is a fifth or a sixth of the American economy. So you can see the struggle we are trying to engage in. It is an enormous obstacle. But the truth is on our side. And in this case, the havoc and destruction and poisoning wrought by these fraud industries is so great, and its threat to quality of life and to life itself is so enormous and immediate, that I do believe we have a chance of success against them merely by publicizing our case, because more and more people are waking up to the treachery, and they're seeking modes of life where they will not be turned into a gimp and a mummified puppet of these monstrosities. But you must understand what we are and what we're not. The fight against mass immigration, against the introduction of the lies of gender theory and the chemical castration of the young, against the poisoning of nature and the destruction of your health. Our fight also against industry of lies and the saccharine lies like human equality, the lie against nature, the teaching of human rights that is a fraud, that supports all of this satanic evil that I have described. This is all the same fight, because for us it is the fight for the preservation of ancient virgin forest, of the same forest within man and among the peoples. And anyone who works to deny this, whatever arguments and self-delusions they use, remember they are partisans only of deformity and slavery in the end, while we are the partisans and soldiers of nature.